The girl in the wheelchair sat motionless by the window, her eyes fixed on the man kneeling in her garden. His hands moved with practiced precision as he coaxed life from the barren soil, the same hands that had once saved her from drowning when no one else noticed her struggling. He didn't know she watched him every day. He didn't know who she really was. And he certainly didn't know that her father, one of the richest men in the country, was about to make a decision that would change both their lives forever. If you're moved by stories of unexpected kindness and lives transformed through compassion, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming true stories that restore faith in humanity. Marco Alvarez wiped sweat from his brow as the summer sun beat down on his back. At 42, his body reminded him daily that landscaping was a young man's game, but he had little choice. Since losing his wife to cancer 3 years ago, he'd taken any work he could find to support himself and his daughter, Sophia. "Water break, Dad?" Sophia called from beneath the shade of an oak tree. At 15, she was the spitting image of her mother, same warm brown eyes, same gentle smile that could disarm even the most hardened heart. Marco straightened, feeling his lower back protest. "Good idea, Mija." He walked over and accepted the water bottle she offered, gulping it down gratefully. They were working at the Westbrook estate, a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of town that belonged to tech billionaire Richard Westbrook. Marco had been hired to revitalize the property's neglected gardens, a job that would keep him employed for months if he did it well. "How's the science project coming?" he asked, settling beside Sophia on the grass. She brightened. "Great. I think I might actually have a shot at the scholarship." Marco squeezed her shoulder. "Of course you do. You're the smartest person I know." "Dad," she rolled her eyes, but he could tell she was pleased. "I mean it. You're going to college, Sophia. I promise you that." The determination in his voice masked his worry. Despite working 60-hour weeks, Marco was barely keeping them afloat. The medical bills from his wife's illness had drained their savings, and Sophia's college fund consisted of whatever spare dollars he could set aside each month, never enough. "Mr. Alvarez?" A woman's voice interrupted them. Marco turned to see Mrs. Peterson, the Westbrook estate manager, approaching with her perpetually pinched expression. "There's a pond on the east side of the property that needs attention," she said without preamble. "Mr. Westbrook specifically requested you handle it personally." Marco nodded. "I'll get to it right away." As Mrs. Peterson walked away, Sophia whispered, "She scares me." Marco chuckled. "She scares everyone, Mija. That's how she keeps her job." He stood, stretching. "I'll check out this pond. You okay here with your books?" "Always," Sophia replied, already reopening her physics textbook. The east side of the property was wilder than the manicured lawn surrounding the mansion. Marco followed a winding path through a small wooded area until he reached a clearing. There, nestled among weeping willows, was a pond that had clearly once been beautiful but now lay choked with algae and debris. As he assessed the work ahead, movement caught his eye. Through the trees, he glimpsed a solitary figure on a balcony of the mansion's east wing, a girl in a wheelchair, watching him. When she realized he'd spotted her, she quickly wheeled back from the railing. Marco returned to his task, curious but respectful of the family's privacy. He'd heard rumors that Westbrook had a daughter who was rarely seen in public, but he made it a point not to gossip about his employers. The pond would need significant work. As he began clearing debris, Marco noticed something glinting beneath the murky water. Reaching in, he pulled out a tarnished silver locket. He opened it carefully, revealing a faded photograph of a smiling woman holding a baby. "That's my mother." Marco startled at the voice. A young woman in a wheelchair had approached silently along the garden path. She appeared to be around 20, with long dark hair and striking blue eyes that contrasted sharply with her pale skin. Her legs were covered with a blanket despite the summer heat. "I'm sorry," Marco said, quickly wiping the locket on his shirt. "I found it in the pond." I lost it years ago, she said, her voice soft but clear. I thought it was gone forever. Marco handed her the locket, noticing how her fingers trembled slightly as she took it. Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. Marco Alvarez. Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. I'm Eleanor Westbrook. Marco nodded respectfully. It's nice to meet you, Miss Westbrook. Please, call me Ellie. Everyone does. She paused, looking at the pond. Or they would if there were many people to call me anything. There was such loneliness in her voice that Marco felt a pang of sympathy. This pond must have been beautiful once. Ellie's expression softened. It was my mother's favorite place. She used to bring me here to feed the koi and watch dragonflies. Her fingers closed around the locket. She died when I was 10. I'm sorry, Marco said, the words inadequate but sincere. My wife passed away 3 years ago. Ellie met his eyes, recognition of shared grief passing between them. Does it get easier? Marco considered his answer carefully. Not easier. Different. The pain changes shape. She nodded as if he'd confirmed something she already knew. Are you working on the pond? Yes. Your father requested it specifically. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. Did he? That's what I was told. Ellie looked thoughtful. Would you mind if I watched sometimes? This place holds many memories. Of course not, Marco replied. It's your home. She smiled then, transforming her solemn face. Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. Marco, please. Marco, she repeated. I should go before Mrs. Peterson sends a search party. She worries. As Ellie wheeled away, Marco returned to his work with renewed purpose. There was something about the young woman's quiet dignity that reminded him of his wife during her final months, a grace in the face of limitation that humbled him. Over the next few days, Marco worked methodically to restore the pond. He drained the stagnant water, removed years of accumulated silt, and repaired the stone edging that had crumbled in places. Throughout, Ellie would appear silently, sometimes watching for hours, occasionally asking questions about his work. On the 4th day, as Marco was installing a new filtration system, Sophia joined him after finishing her homework. Dad, who's that? She whispered, nodding toward Ellie, who was reading a book beneath a willow tree. Miss Westbrook, Marco replied. The owner's daughter. Sophia's eyes widened. Should I say hello? If you'd like. Marco watched as his daughter approached Ellie with the easy confidence of youth. Within minutes, they were deep in conversation, Sophia gesturing animatedly while Ellie listened with evident interest. Later, as they drove home, Sophia couldn't stop talking about her new acquaintance. She's so smart, Dad. She has degrees in literature and history, and she reads like 5 books a week. And guess what? She's going to help me with my science project. Marco smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. That's wonderful, Mija. She said I could come back tomorrow. Is that okay? As long as you finish your chores first. Sophia agreed eagerly, and Marco felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Since her mother's death, Sophia had withdrawn from many of her friends, burying herself in studies instead. Seeing her excited about a new connection warmed his heart. The next morning, Marco arrived at the estate earlier than usual, hoping to finish the pond's filtration system before the day grew too hot. To his surprise, he found Richard Westbrook himself standing by the water's edge, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit despite the early hour. Mr. Alvarez, Westbrook said, extending his hand. I've been meaning to compliment your work. Marco shook the offered hand, acutely aware of his own calloused palm against Westbrook's smooth one. Thank you, sir. Westbrook was tall and lean, with silver-streaked dark hair and the same striking blue eyes as his daughter. Though he must have been in his 50s, he carried himself with the energy of a much younger man. My daughter tells me you found her mother's locket, Westbrook said, his gaze fixed on the pond. Yes, sir. It was in the water. Westbrook nodded slowly. That locket was the last gift I gave my wife before she died. Ellie was devastated when she lost it. Marco remained silent, sensing there was more to come. She also tells me your daughter is quite brilliant. A potential scientist? Sophia loves physics, Marco confirmed. She's hoping for a scholarship. Westbrook seemed to be considering something. Mr. Alvarez, how would you feel about expanding your role here? The entire property could benefit from your expertise, not just this corner. Marco blinked in surprise. I'd be honored, Mr. Westbrook. Excellent. Mrs. Peterson will discuss the details with you. Westbrook turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. My daughter rarely takes an interest in visitors. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. With that cryptic statement, he strode away, leaving Marco puzzled but grateful for the expanded opportunity. As summer progressed, a routine developed. Marco worked on restoring the gardens while Sophia, having finished her summer school classes, spent afternoons with Ellie. The two had formed an unlikely friendship, the billionaire's daughter and the landscaper's child, separated by circumstance but united by curious minds. One evening, as Marco was finishing for the day, he heard a splash followed by a terrified scream. He sprinted toward the pond to find Ellie's empty wheelchair tipped on its side at the water's edge. Without hesitation, Marco dove into the pond. The water was clear now but still deep enough in the center to submerge an adult. He spotted Ellie immediately, her dark hair floating around her pale face as she struggled weakly against the weight of her unresponsive legs. Marco reached her in seconds, wrapping an arm around her waist and pulling her to the surface. She gasped for air as they broke through, coughing and trembling. I've got you, he assured her, swimming toward the edge where Sophia stood wide-eyed with fear. Together, father and daughter helped Ellie onto the grass. Her clothes clung to her thin frame, and her breathing came in ragged gasps. What happened? Marco asked, once she'd caught her breath. I was too close to the edge, Ellie explained between coughs. The brake wasn't set properly. When I leaned forward to look at a water lily, the chair tipped. Can you swim? Sophia asked. Ellie shook her head. Not since the accident. My legs. She trailed off, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. Marco removed his work jacket and draped it over her shoulders. Let's get you inside. No. Ellie's response was immediate and forceful. Please, don't tell anyone. Especially not my father or Mrs. Peterson. Ellie, you nearly drowned, Marco protested. If they find out, they'll never let me come out here alone again. Her eyes pleaded with him. This garden, this pond, it's the only freedom I have. Marco hesitated, torn between responsibility and respect for her autonomy. Please, she whispered. I'll be more careful, I promise. Finally, he nodded. At least let us help you back to the house so you can change. Ellie agreed to this compromise. Marco righted her wheelchair while Sophia helped wring out Ellie's clothes as best she could. Together, they took a back path to a side entrance Ellie indicated would be unmonitored. At the door, Ellie turned to Marco. Thank you, she said simply. Not many people would have reacted so quickly. Marco shrugged. Anyone would have done the same. No, Ellie said with certainty. They wouldn't have. The incident at the pond marked a turning point. Ellie began spending more time with Marco as he worked, not just watching but asking to help with tasks she could manage from her wheelchair, planting flowers in raised beds he built, selecting locations for new trees, even designing a butterfly garden near the pond. Through their conversations, Marco learned about the car accident that had left Ellie paralyzed at 16, just as she was preparing to leave for college. The same accident had taken her mother's life, leaving Ellie with both physical and emotional scars. Dad retreated into his work after we lost Mom, she explained one afternoon as they planted lavender. I think looking at me reminded him too much of what we'd lost. I'm sure that's not true, Marco said gently. Ellie smiled sadly. You haven't seen how he avoids being alone with me. The great Richard Westbrook can solve any problem except a broken daughter. You're not broken, Marco said firmly. Different, maybe. Adapted. But not broken. Ellie's hands stilled in the soil. My therapist used to say something similar. Smart therapist. I stopped going after a while. It seemed pointless when nothing was changing. She resumed planting. But lately, I've been thinking maybe change doesn't always look like what we expect. Marco nodded, understanding more than she knew. After his wife died, he'd measured progress by all the wrong metrics, days without crying, hours without thinking of her. It had taken time to realize healing wasn't about forgetting but about finding new ways to carry his love for her. The garden is proof of that, he said, gesturing to the transformation around them. 6 weeks ago, this was all overgrown and forgotten. Now look at it. Ellie surveyed their work with pride. The pond sparkled in the sunlight, surrounded by blooming flowers and newly planted trees. Stone paths now wound through the garden, wide enough for her wheelchair to navigate easily. It's beautiful, she agreed. But it took someone who could see its potential. Marco met her gaze, recognizing the deeper meaning in her words. Sometimes we all need someone else to see possibilities we've forgotten. As summer began to wane, Marco noticed a change in Ellie. She smiled more readily, ventured further from the house, and even allowed Sophia to take her into town one afternoon, her first trip beyond the estate grounds in months, according to an astonished Mrs. Peterson. One morning, Marco arrived to find Richard Westbrook waiting for him by the newly restored rose garden. Walk with me, Mr. Alvarez, Westbrook requested, his tone making it clear this was not optional. They strolled in silence for several minutes before Westbrook spoke again. My daughter's doctors have noticed significant improvement in her condition recently. Marco raised an eyebrow. Her condition? Not the paralysis, that's permanent. But her overall health. Her blood pressure has normalized, her chronic pain has decreased, and most notably, her depression seems to be lifting. That's wonderful news, Marco said sincerely. Westbrook stopped walking and turned to face him directly. The only variable that's changed is you and your daughter entering her life. Marco shifted uncomfortably under the billionaire's intense scrutiny. Ellie is an extraordinary young woman, Mr. Westbrook. Sophia and I simply enjoy her company. It's more than that, Westbrook insisted. You've given her something I couldn't, despite all my resources. And what's that, sir? Purpose. Connection. Westbrook's composure slipped momentarily, revealing the worried father beneath the powerful exterior. After the accident, I tried everything, the best doctors, experimental treatments, therapists, companions. Nothing worked. She withdrew more each year. Marco thought carefully before responding. With respect, Mr. Westbrook, maybe what Ellie needed wasn't more treatment but more normalcy. People who see her, not her wheelchair. Westbrook considered this. Perhaps you're right. He resumed walking. In any case, I have a proposition for you. Sir? I'm establishing a foundation focused on accessible garden spaces for rehabilitation facilities. I want you to oversee it. Marco stopped in his tracks. Mr. Westbrook, I'm just a landscaper. You're a man who transformed not only my gardens but my daughter's outlook on life. That's exactly who I need. Westbrook handed him a business card. My assistant will provide the details. The position includes a substantial salary increase and a college fund for your daughter. Marco stared at the card, stunned by the opportunity being presented. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Westbrook replied simply.